I intended this to be a three-part series, but I had an idea in the back of my head as I was reflecting on that last part. There's an opportunity here to show something important, and it happens to be something my students often struggle with. That's the relationship between the view and the model. I haven't talked before about the software architecture here. Let me say a few words about it. I'm using a separable model architecture. That means that my model is independent of my view. My model consists of those two classes, query and result. My view depends on the model. This is a very simple architecture. It's much simpler than MVC or MVP or MVVM if you've heard of any of those. Understanding that separation is crucial for making sense out of why we could pull query control out earlier. However, you may have been wondering, why does query control return a search term instead of a query? It is, after all, the query control. If that's what your intuition told you, congratulations on that, because you'd be right. Let's go ahead and refactor this so that it returns a query, that is, a model layer object, instead of a string, which is just a built-in data type. We need to rename the method and change its parameter type. That will require us to make a change down here, where we return query objects instead. Incidentally, I'm using a static factory method here, which is generally a safer practice than calling the constructor directly through the new operator. Now let's go to where the interface is used. And here, we should be able to simply change the type within execute query. Now the signature of the referenced method matches that in the interface, and so this reference works again. We no longer need line 34 at all. And that should do it. Let's run the application to be sure. Great. And our disabling of the button, of course, still works because that's encapsulated within query control. This is a great improvement to our application. Notice that now the main application doesn't know anything about strings. It simply gets back the query and executes it. With that in mind, let's try replacing the current approach of managing the output with a custom-built ResultView object. ResultView needs to be a JavaFX widget, and I think we can get away with having its superclass be parent. It will contain a text area. Make sure you grab the one from JavaFX and not AWT. Notice that ResultView probably could extend text area, but I don't want other agents in the system to know that it's behaving like a text area. I want that to be completely encapsulated within this class. The constructor then can ensure that that text area is properly initialized, like we did in MainApplication. We need to ensure that we instantiate it too. And of course, add it to this container. That should be enough to set up the result view structurally. Now we need to add the behavior that makes it show a result. Notice again an important fact here that we're sending the result object itself and not some bundle of strings or other data. We're using the domain model object that we already have. The algorithm here can be just like we had in MainApplication. Okay, let's revise MainApplication to use ResultView. Instead of calling this method to configure it, we should be able to just create one directly. Here, instead of manually changing the display, we can eliminate that and tell the result view to show the results. And finally, we shouldn't need that utility method at all. MainApplication is looking pretty trim and sleek. I like it. It also has high cohesion. Remember, that's the idea that the fields that exist in this class are used in almost all of its methods. Let's look at ResultView also. Oh, we have one compiler warning here. It's probably just an unused import. Good. Let's return to ResultView and review it. We have one warning on the side here. I didn't remember that this was a warning that the compiler could give you, but you know I like things to be final if they can be made final, so let's go ahead and follow that advice. Okay, we should test the application. Great. So let's review the main idea here. Before this refactoring step, we had the main application passing strings around between different pieces. While we can do that, string is not very expressive, and you can literally take any data and put it into a string somehow. Rather than rely on classes like string, we should be using the domain model that we created. In this case, we have the query control returning query objects, which the main application then uses to construct results, and the results then are shown in the result view. That allows the main application to be very simple and clear, and we're obviously following single responsibility principle. If we want to make a change with how queries work, or how results work, we make those changes in the model layer. If we want to change the graphical user interface that the user uses with respect to queries and results, we use the corresponding view layer classes. I hope you found that useful, and happy programming.